Welcome to memoQ Talks, where we talk to industry leaders about their experiences, lessons learned, and what works best across all areas of localization. Now here's your host.
Hey Richard, how are you today?
Hey Mark, I'm good. I'm on vacation, as you guys.
Oh,
said.
nice. Well, I'm sorry to pull you away.
No, that wasn't a. Please don't talk to me. That was. I'm so excited to talk to memoQ. I'm on vacation, but you know what it's like. You're never away from your laptop. So
yeah. So where are you at?
I am working from a city called Angers in France, which is where my wife's family lives, which is lovely. The sun's shining.
Awesome. And
I wish I could we could have a beer in the garden. It's beautiful.
Help yourself. Yeah. What is Angers famous for?
It's they've got a massive castle in the middle of the city. So it's famous for slate. It's famous for Cointreau. It's famous for a minty drink called mint pastis, which I've said totally wrong. And in the middle of the city, there's an enormous medieval castle, and the French don't even notice it. It's
awesome,
bizarre, but it is unbelievable.
Sounds like a nice place to relax for a week or so.
It is. So we're here for a week, then we're going to drive around the south for a couple of weeks.
I'm really envious of all my European friends and colleagues because you can do that. You can just get in the car and drive to 4 or 5 different countries. You know.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, we can.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Everywhere's just 2.5 hours on a plane, so it's
That's excellent. Hey, so what I wanted to talk to you today was about a subject that's kind of dear to me, and that is sales. And I've focused most of my career on the sales and business development side, and I always like talking to other experienced professionals who have either coached or been active in the sales and business development area, because it's good to exchange ideas and best practices and all that. So maybe if we can just kind of kick things off, because I know you do some sales training, right?
Yeah, I mean that's come out of frustration. And the frustration, as everybody, right? So the frustration came from, I think I had an LSP for 25 years and worked in everything right from admin to eventually chief exec, and then exited. But along that journey, we've always had this issue about we create an enormous amount of value for our customers, for the world economy, imagine without language where we'd be, and yet we get paid on a commodity based per word, per page, per line basis. Initially, I went to do my MBA to try and solve this conundrum, but sales, I guess we can start a conversation here. I was 3/4 of the way through my MBA, Mark, and all of my conversations at work were about sales. Like pipeline, what have we closed today? What we're going to close it? What's the opportunity? What's the P&L look like? Which is essentially sales. Sales is the top line of the P&L revenue. Everything coming in is sales. So we talk about that at work, and yet I'd go do my studies, which was 20 years ago now, and we talk about marketing, or we talk about operations management, or we talk about legal or financial, all these sort of big boy grown up topics, and not sales. So I took my tutor to one side. I'd just started my thesis. I'd nearly finished the whole thing. And I said to him, Chris, I said, all my conversations at work are about sales, conversations at business school, which I've really enjoyed, about other things. And he said, come into my office, Richard. And this big South African guy, right? Went into his office and he shut the door behind me, got up into my grill like this and says, listen, you're not doing an MBA to be a beep salesman. Now get out my office.
Wow.
And I thought,
well, it's funny because
I am.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm here to sell more product or to learn.
Sales makes the world go around, right? And
without
for
it,
some reason,
where would we be?
we're all thrown into that bucket of the used car sales guy, and it's So where did you go from there?
So gosh, that would have been 2006. So finished my MBA, loved it, great experience. Anyone's consider it, they should go and do it. But then started looking at different types of sales training, which most of it there was nothing in our industry for a start, but then most of it was just useless. So objection handling or, whatever sort of basic sales training, and just trying to convince people to buy stuff, which is more, I always think as well that someone convinced against their will is of the same opinion still. So we've got to facilitate a journey as opposed to actually try and do some magic and make somebody buy our stuff and then regret it after. That's not, that can't get you out of bed in the morning. That's not what we're doing. So did various things, bumped into the world of value, and I went back to academia eventually, to which found a couple of professors who were studying value creation in B2B, which is a real, if I ever do a PhD, it's going to be in this particular niche, but it's a real thin niche. But I just thought, we're creating value. I mean, all businesses create value for the businesses. Mm-hmm. So how can we study that? So then there's an academic research club at my business school called the Key Account Management Forum, which I'm now part of the faculty. So joined that. I've been a member for that 10, 15 years and sort of hung around so much they made me faculty last year, which is one of my own personal highlights. But it's that, studying that, and it's trying to understand the value that we create, and then look at the customer and the customer's customer and things like the value chain, and then trying to calculate what's the value that we actually create, mm-hmm. and then negotiating and innovating around that conversation, as opposed to 10 cents a word, 9 cents a word, 8 cents a word, that sort of race to zero. And, because there's technology in the market that makes it free. And with some customers, it's perceived as free anyway. I've done loads of deals where they've said, why should we pay you anything? Google Translate is free. And it's like, God, you could eat the table when they say that to you. But if that's the perception, then it's your job as a salesperson to change that perception. So I've been all around the houses, to use an idiom, an English idiom, but I've been everywhere trying to solve this, which the side effect of that has been that as I've found things, I've wanted to evangelize to the industry about these different value creation models and about this model of key account management and so on. So that's given me plenty of material to talk about with people like yourself, get that conversation going. Yeah.
I've felt the exact frustration, both in terms of, you take business classes in university. Mm-hmm. I've never seen a sales class ever, no. And it's pretty important. I mean, it's a foundational part of almost every business. Yeah. The other thing is there are some good programs out there, but I've always kind of liked to mix and match. And when you talk about our industry, there is that commoditization kind of element, right? Where you're, at the end of the day, you're selling a service and people want to know what's your word rate. So let's back up a little bit and imagine that you're talking to the owner of a mid-sized LSP, or, maybe they're smallish, but they want to grow. And they're out there competing in this commoditized kind of context. What are some things that you would tell them that they could do to maybe change their approach to be a little bit more effective and aligned with that kind of value development or value offering?
So I think all businesses go through various transitions at various stages of their growth. So you'll start a firm. I've just started a new company. So you start a firm and it's just you in your little boat and you're being bashed around by the sea and it's great fun. And you start to grow. Eventually you have to employ people and you're doing admin and not sales or training or whatever you're meant to be. And you've got that problem to solve. So you have that sort of piece of turbulence. Then it grows and the team needs to embed another piece of turbulence and so on. So I think first of all, it's that growth isn't linear. Mm-hmm. And although if you read the press, they'd have you believe that Mark Zuckerberg had an idea and then all of a sudden he's got a $25 billion in the bank. But it's not, it might work for some people, but it's not a linear growth pattern. I think as well, LSPs done right can be incredibly profitable as well. So you can have a $5 million LSP and have a very, very nice lifestyle off the back of that, providing your margins are in place, you've got the right technology and so on. So it's about positioning where you want to be. And our industry does this as well. So you see it all the time where people talk about a $50 million deal, or it's always about the top line. It's always about that. So it's certainly in the UK, we had that all the time. I used to do a lot of work with the government, and the government would spend a lot of money, or they'd put these RFPs out that had a huge headline on, $350 million is one of them. Good luck even seeing 5% of that. It's just nonsense. It's just a number that they'd made up out of nowhere. And then you've got government work, so the margin's tiny. So then it's it's not what you sell, it's what you keep that actually matters on that. So I think as well, don't fall for that sort of contest of announcing the big deals or being on the 4,000 or 5,000 list and things like that, because you can have, there's some very, very nice, very profitable companies that are sort of flying under the radar, nice and steady in our industry.
Yeah, I mean, that, to me, that's more like of a strategy discussion. I mean, are we pursuing bigger business for the sake of just growing revenues, or are we looking for higher margins, more value added services and so on? And I think that's pretty important. It's also, and if we, stay on the sales track.
Yeah, sure.
A lot of times salespeople, they feel like they get beat up over pricing, and they're like, "Hey, can we get a discount?" So let's just go through a couple different scenarios. Okay, you're the sales manager. I'm, the hard charging sales guy, and I'm like, "Hey, boss, we need to offer a discount here. They want a lower rate." What would be some of the questions you would ask, or some of the advice that you might give?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of discount, I want us. So let's pretend we owned an LSP, me and you, right? That's the dream scenario. In terms of discount, I want our sales team to understand what that means to the bottom line. So we might only reduce it by 10%, but let's work that through on the P&L and see what that actually means to the bottom line. Sometimes the procurement people just need something to show their boss. They need some sort of signifier of value there on that. What I'd much sooner do, and what I've done in my career, is try and negotiate on the content supply chain. So I use this example because I've done it, but if you were producing, say, food labels, somebody decides what items to sell of the catalogue in what country. Somebody writes the food label. Somebody checks it in English, if it's done in English or whatever language. Somebody translates it. Somebody does the design. Somebody does the print and so on. That's a whole process there, a whole supply chain that you can negotiate on. When I'm in the hot seat, I'd sort of negotiate like this with other people in that supply chain. And that's around looking at the supply chain as a whole and trying to innovate in that. If you break that down to what that means for the salespeople, it means their skill set needs to be broader. Because it used to be, when we started, we just turn up and show the pencil. It was almost what we were like the Google of the business world. They'd ask us a question and we'd tell them the really biased answer, and that was basically the sales process. That was easy. Now it's about context. So we need to think about how the translation, for instance, how that appears in that context. And in that food labeling example, there's obviously, and I think as well, we're lucky because our industry is incredibly lean. So we're a well-oiled machine running at speed. We've been on this commodity-based thing for 20, 25 years, and it's a very lean place. If you look at other industries, legal, kind of creative as well, but they've got much more fat on the bone. So you can apply some of our technologies that we've, like translation memories, for instance, but you can apply some of those philosophies or some of those technologies to other parts of the supply chain, and that can help you negotiate a different process.
Do you ever look at, say, volume guarantees or volume discounts? So, for example, we'd be willing to maybe discuss our rates, but in exchange for that, we'd like to, establish like a minimum.
There's all that quid pro quo stuff that we can do, right? I think that's a bit old hat. So that's yes, we can do all that, and you should do all that. That's all, that's sort of sales 101. And but I think I really don't want to, discounts bring me out in a rush. I really don't want to go down the world of giving a discount initially for the sake of giving a discount, because it's the case of, well, let's look at the process. So it's more like I'd sooner have a conversation about how that translation is going to be used in that supply chain, and then saying, look, give us 3 months. Let's see if we can do some analysis. Let's see if we can help you on that wider process. Because then it's that value. And again, I always think Mr. Price and Mr. Value should balance if we had some scales. But if you got, say, let's pick on Facebook because it's Facebook. But if Facebook came to our imaginary LSP, give us, I don't know, $50 million or whatever it is to localize all of their stuff, well, the value that would create, that'd be enormous, because that equals sort of communicating with the world. So we need to balance those two things out. So how do we do that? We need to be broader as a discipline in terms of sales. We need to be able to understand and quantify that, then communicate that back to the customer, about the value that creates, and then hopefully innovate around our own service, not just our service. So it used to be that we'd need to know about this pen and how this pen functions, but now it's like the value in use. It's how the pen's used by the consumer and how that innovation happens.
I mean, if you can drive conversions because you're translating into different languages, and then you're actually able to expand your business in those markets because of the translation, then you can demonstrate an ROI based upon the investment in the translation and then the resultant sales.
Yeah.
I would say one of the most amazing sales calls I was ever on was in Tokyo, which in Japan, things usually take a lot of time. But we were first meeting with an American private equity company. They had acquired a hotel chain in Japan. They had like 110 properties. And they were talking about three different vendors about translation. And we went in, and fortunately, the company I was with had just acquired a company that specialized in SEO.
Right.
And the CEO for that organization was visiting Tokyo. I took him in there, and the American VCs walked in, and it was unlike any meeting I've ever had in Japan, where they were just hard charging back and forth, question after question for an hour and a half. But we didn't talk about translation. We talked about what they were trying to achieve. And they had acquired these properties. They needed to get people in those hotels. And they were targeting the the Korean and the Chinese market, of course, being in Japan, some Japanese. So they needed to get everything into Korean and to Chinese. But we didn't talk about translation. We talked about SEO, optimized translation, and how we can help them, get to the top of the search results. Yeah. And that's where the conversation went. And it went on. It was scheduled for an hour, went on for an hour and a half. And at the end, they said, "Look, if you guys can do this, we want to go now." And that was like a $200,000 deal. First meeting in Japan. And by the way, like I said, it never happens like that. But it was the right people. And we didn't talk about translation. We talked about how we can help them get people in their room. So I think that's kind of an example of the point you were making.
Yeah, I mean, it might be. We might exist in a world where the thing that we sell isn't, but it's perceived as no value. It's perceived as being free. So our choices are, we can either, like that, then you're absolute genius. You can either keep banging the translation drum, which they'll be like, oh, there's a million people doing that. Or you can actually, like my grandma used to say, you got two ears and one mouth. You got to listen more than you speak. And it's about, let's listen to the challenge that's there and trying to innovate around it. And I think that as salespeople, that's the value we offer. Good ones, we can think on our feet, and it's the case of, all right, okay, let's innovate around that. If you can do it in the room, even better. And it's thinking about that. But I think it means that our scope is broader. So we need to be more into things like general management and business and, that as opposed to just basic sales skills. So I think with me, I've come full circle in terms of this. If I'm doing sales now, the MBA that I got taught is probably more relevant now than the sales skills that I've picked up, because I guess it's a big soup, really. It's all mixed up, but you need that broad business knowledge. That can help you to do that, to think on your feet. And then if you're talking about SEO and getting more eyeballs on more pages and things like that, then that's a different, that will happen at a different strata of that conversation in the organization. And the more senior you go, that person you spoke to probably could sign off $200,000 in the room. Somebody else in procurement, a junior person in procurement, might be $50,000 or whatever, don't really understand, and they're just waiting for 5:30 till they can go home. But
so how do you deal with procurement professionals who, they're not specialists in translation or SEO or anything? They're specialists in procurement and beating us up and asking for discounts. So, how do you have that value demonstrating conversation with somebody who really doesn't get what we're doing?
So I've got a huge chip on my shoulder, or used to, about procurement people. So my own sort of business experience, we did a lot of work. So we had the .com boom, did a load of work off the back of that, but that was easy. Everybody did. Then it calmed down again. Then we got involved with government. So early 2000s, I guess, we were doing a lot of government work, which is just tea and biscuits. That's easy. You do a RFP once every 5 years, win it. And then low margins, but really boring.
And then figure out how to deliver it. Yes.
Yeah. And it would be paper. So, we were really late to the to the workflow party because we didn't need one because we had paper. I mean, I used to go to Budapest and tell the memoQ guys, they'd laugh in my face because it was like, we actually get boxes of paper to translate. Really boring, lovely. That's it. The innovation we did, and when we were picking up from the taxman in the UK before us, they used a pencil to translate. So we used a computer. We were like wizards from the future, Mark. It was ridiculous. Anyway, so we had all that. So we didn't really have to bother with procurement people. And then we started getting involved in corporate world sort of 15 years ago, and we're just clashing. So certainly me, it was like just clashing with these procurement people. So after a few years of doing this, I thought, I need to learn how these people think. I can't pay the mortgage if I'm, we just had an argument. So I started to go on their courses. So I started to behave like, so I thought, I'm going to read the books that you're reading and I'm going to go on the courses that you do. So I signed up for 4 or 5 procurement management courses and made friends in that area. And I found that so as a marketeer, we'd segment the market and then we create personas. Then we'd try and sell to the persona groups. They do the same to us. So procurement people segment their suppliers and then treat their suppliers as commodities, as strategic, as, future stars or, things like that. So it's then a case of, right, okay, so do we want to be perceived as a commodity? No. We want to be perceived as a strategic supplier to this organization. So then they were talking about things like supply risk and profit impact, but to them and their supply chain. So you have to change the narrative around just being, that's what we're talking about, discounts. Oh my God. So I'd love doing RFPs, but if you're just writing a number on a spreadsheet, it's going to be a low number because everybody else in the world can do that. But if you're having a conversation around value and value creation, that's slightly different because we want to be that trusted advisor and that strategic partner to help Facebook or Walmart or whoever to actually conquer the world and go into that. And I think it fits with our industry. That's why I'm so excited about localization, because we're a lean company. We're international. We've got wonderful ecosystems. We've been working. We were moaning earlier about working from home, but we've been working from home forever since the internet started, since ISDN cables came. And it's like we've all been doing that forever. So we've got that ecosystem all set up, which is incredibly valuable to large B2B, deals and things like that.
When you're dealing with procurement teams, are you having that value discussion with them or with their constituents in the organization who've asked for the RFP or asked for them to go out and procure these services, or is it both?
So it's invariably it's going to be both. You'll do some deals where you get involved with the product managers or the website guys if you're doing SEO and or marketing, things like that. And then I've done some deals where it's got to the end of the deal and they've said, "Sorry, Rich, but you're going to have to go and talk to procurement. You
got to be a registered vendor." And
we go and do that conversation. We have to get through that, and you have to be a rainmaker. You have to roll with the punches, and there's a bit of give and take there. Anyway, you've got to get through that. But the mood music of that is we're a strategic supplier. We're important to the organisation. I can demonstrate the value, so it helps with that conversation.
Give me a couple hints on how, or tips on how you could demonstrate the value in become from would you call it a commoditized supplier versus a strategic supplier?
One thing I always used to do and encourage my sales team to do was to read the investor relations pack. So by law, anyone who's listed on any stock market in the US and Europe, I assume the world, has to release investor relations material. They have their phone calls as well. So get to know them. So even if it's just on the train to London, on the way to the meeting, at least read the executive summary, because in there it's going to tell you what their objectives are for different markets. Everyone's global. Everyone's going to be bragging about doing business in 50 million languages and so on. Well, you can start to demonstrate that. So you can start to quote their own investor relations pack back to them. And that helps as well. So it's thinking about getting an idea of that. So I've always tried to be more of a, look, we're helping you achieve these goals, whether those goals are ESG goals, that's been popular at the minute, or expansion goals, or we're trying to move the share price north, or things like that. We always, talk their language and think about that. And I think our industry's got tons of acronyms and special words, and we're linguists, right? But talk the customer's language, try and get to understand what they're actually about and what they're doing, because we don't want to be a commodity or perceived as a commodity. Eventually everything will get commoditized anyway, and there's branding work we can do to help, and there's, that great. But that initial conversation, we need to be never ever get tired of telling the customer about how much value you offer as well.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to do that, you need to work it out. So you need to be the messenger of value, which is tricky to do. And it's tricky. So the problem we've got in sales, right? Certainly in the UK, I think there's loads of sales positions open in the year. Something like 50,000 sales positions open in the UK. It's a ridiculously large number. I assume times 8 for the US. It's a crazy number. And I think we're seeing that through some of the salaries that we're seeing in terms of salespeople. But it's about the people that are in sales at the moment, certainly B2B, whether they've got the right skill sets or not to do all of this, because they'll be great at doing outreach, great at, making relationships and things like that, and objection handling. But it's the case of, right, well, okay, but we took all that away. And like you said there, you're in the room with the Japanese senior team on your feet. You've got to know enough about SEO to convince them that you're the people. You've got to know enough about how your product is used in context of delivering them extra profits or eyeballs or whatever the thing is, or selling more properties, whatever the thing is on that. And you've got to almost create a business model in your head and present it back to them. So there's that challenge for the sales profession. Can't talk about US, I'm not there, but certainly in the UK, there's that challenge here in terms of B2B sales. It's got to be done properly. It's got much more mature really quickly, I think, last 10 years than the people we've got. So the people we've got in the profession at the moment, not all of them are in the right position. So they need retooling.
So that's interesting. And I've led sales teams. I've done a fair amount of sales training myself. And, sales involves so many different elements, whether it's, like you said before, overcoming objectives, building trust, delivering a presentation, cold calling. There's all these different elements. And I feel like with the skill-based elements, I can teach people how to do a very specific skill. For example, how to make a cold call, how to send an outbound email. But a lot of sales comes down to just communications. And we've learned to communicate over our entire lifetimes. And it's a little bit challenging to ask somebody to retool such a core part of their personality, which is how they communicate. So what are your thoughts on that, and how do you manage that?
Oh man, I think might be putting words in your mouth here, but I think each generation looks at the generation behind it and thinks, "Oh my God, it wasn't like that in my day." I mean, I'm guilty of that all the time. I think communication's changed, doesn't it? So, I mean, even this year, with the last 9 months with this ChatGPT front end, Peter Reynolds called it a front end to AI at memoQ Fest, and he's right. It's given it to the masses, so it's given it to people like me, where we can just, for $20 a month, it will do anything I ask it. It's amazing. So we'll write emails and communicate, things like that. That's a really tricky one to answer, I think, because that's changed. So what's a kind of scary and an opportunity as well is, I read the other day, 3 out of 5 buyers are now millennials. So, and if you were born, I said to the wife the other day, if you were born in the year 2000, you'd be 23 and a half now. That's really, you'd be a proper person. But the year 2000, do you know what I mean? The year 2000 seemed like literally
I've got a couple of those in my family. I've got a 25-year-old and a 22-year-old. I've never called them proper people, but they're getting close.
They're getting close. But you'd work. These would have finished the degrees and they'd be at work, and you'd be potentially selling to them. So it's the case of, that means they're digital natives, and the thing of telling people what it was like before the internet is like an old story that the guys, I mean, I can remember when I started work, the people I worked with when I started work in my apprenticeship fought the Germans in the war. And it's like they'd talk about, we'd have our sandwiches at lunch, they'd talk war stories, which is fascinating. But I guess our war stories is what it was like, we're working on floppy disks and using typewriters and things. So it's a different generation.
Fax machines. So,
Yeah. As that changes, it's just a different generation. I think all we can do as a sales team or more mature managers is be flexible, roll with the
So what are
punches.
your thoughts in terms of like outbound sales techniques? Because, you used to be able to call, do something called cold calling, where you would just call people up. A lot of places now they have do not call lists, and so that kind of messes things up in terms of what you can do. Also, a lot of the millennials, younger people, they consider calling somebody to be quite aggressive, even if they have, they've exchanged emails. They would prefer to just use this to maybe send an SMS or a text than calling, right? So, what are your thoughts in terms of, okay, in the context of an LSP, you got to do something for your prospecting. How do you do it? Even LinkedIn is getting challenging these days, right? I mean, because people are just spammed,
The nonsense on LinkedIn I read every day. It's crazy. So everyone's just showing off, and it's a lot of it's written by AI anyway. So it's just, it's just nonsense. I guess.
Why are you looking at me, man? I wasn't.
I'm not. I think the stuff you do is super.
It's only partially written by AI.
It's just proofread. Yeah. No, not at all. I wasn't.
ChatGPT is the front end of me. Yeah.
Wasn't accusing anybody. But you can tell. I mean, you can tell. I said it at memoQ Fest. You can tell who's doing it. I think that social media's got to be a part of that. I think as humans, we can spot authenticity a mile off. And if your process is using ChatGPT to produce a LinkedIn post with loads of emojis and hashtags in, and then post that as your own work, it stands out a mile, and we know you're doing it. So please stop doing it. And it's obvious. And I think you can do too much as well. But it's that thing about social selling, and it's a completely different thing. And these new things come along all the time. So just when LinkedIn Sales Navigator came out, that was amazing for a couple of years. And now everyone's using it, so everyone's got the same data. But you've just got to keep your finger on the pulse and think about what's happening now. And it's a case of the millennials get more mature. I mean, they'll be the old guys one day, won't they? As the millennials get more mature, the next generation comes in, then it's a totally different thing. But I think that marketing can do more of that lead gen process for us. So I think if we go forward 10 years, I think what's going to happen is a lot of that's going to get automated and done in marketing. And then we would do like you said earlier on, the cerebral work where we're like thinking on our feet, rolling with the punches. It's like, oh my goodness, right. He wants a business model developing in the room to do SEO and to do X, Y, Z and to fit our product into supply chain. And that's the value that we offer.
Well, I 100% agree with you on that. That going forward, the burden of lead generation is, if it hasn't already, it's increasingly being shifted to the marketing team. They have to be able to figure out how to automate that. There's so many different tools out there. Marketing teams typically don't like to be held accountable to like lead numbers and things like that, because they're like, oh, what about brand awareness and things like that? But I want to know, how many leads did you show me the money. How many leads have you generated over the last week? Where did they come from? And then we can measure the quality and all that stuff going forward. And I love what you're saying about, having the sales team focus on the higher value activities, like having a discovery call, understanding what the customer wants, and then trying to craft together a solution. And those are all skills, by the way, that nobody is saying AI is going to replace. That ability to empathize and to sit down and have a conversation and creatively solve problems is, at this point, pretty uniquely human. So, thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'm using. So I'm a consultant now, and one thing I can use AI for, I can feed it information, and I can ask it an opinion on the information I've given it, and it can set me off on a different thought process. And I've used it to do like a pre-mortem for some pitches as well. So if we're trying to pitch to a particular company, we can feed as much information into whatever AI platform we're using, and then ask it to ask me questions, if you know what I mean.
Wow.
And that's
kind of like interactive sales training prior to. It's like role playing. I like that. I really like that.
It's good. I mean, it's that one thing we're looking for as well. So I'm going to give you a quick plug in a minute, but one thing we're looking for is an application for this. We don't know how to, as a profession, we've got to find how to apply it. You can ask it to write your LinkedIn posts.
Hey, man. Hey, Richard, let's take this offline. I think there's a whole other product idea here, man. Seriously, like
let's get the website.
Scenario planning tool for sales professionals. And you're going into this meeting, you're going to be talking with these people. What are some of the questions that they're going to ask?
Yeah. And you
Probably
could give them.
We already know most of the questions.
Yeah, you totally do.
But sometimes you get blindsided. And when you get blindsided, it's no big deal. You can just say, hey, it's a great question. Haven't heard it before. Yeah. Let me go check with the team and come back to you. But
it's a good way to train your sales team as well. So I'd use it. I was involved at uni helping the uni team sell some courses. And we do like a role play before, and I can pretend to be the buyer or they will and so on. And we have that sort of back and forth, which if you don't use that, you should use that technique in your sales. That really helps because you can be really nasty. And then when you get in front of the buyer, they're really nice and they're lovely people. Sure. And it's, so you've trained on someone who's being awkward on purpose and really stupid on purpose. Then the buyer's really well informed, a really nice person. But you can use AI to ask, and it will ask crazy questions, but it helps you to do what you said there, to think on your feet and to be like, how do you train that? You have to have the conversation 1,000 times, don't you?
No, like my brain is like, just like, because now I'm thinking of like, okay, I'm going to be late coming home. What are the questions my wife's going to ask? Okay?
Yeah. Give me 10 questions. Yeah.
Select the best answer. Which one is she going to believe and not get pissed off at?
When you find the answer to that,
here you go.
Let me know. Yeah. Good luck with that. But it's thinking about the application. So I'm going to do a plug now. In my university life, I'm organising a conference. So one of the things I said was about studying B2B sales and how value is created between two companies and things like that. I'm organising a conference at Cranford University on the 23rd and 24th of November. If you're in the UK, I would love you to come. Any of your listeners, please come. I'll give you a discount. But it's about AI and
what did you just say? You just said the D word.
Discount. Yeah. Well, it's not my money, so it doesn't matter.
Oh, okay.
I'll give you a special early bird race. That's a better way of saying it. Yeah, I've come out in a rush now. But it's about the application of AI. We're looking to how to apply AI in the world of pricing, in the world of B2B sales and training and negotiation, things like that. So it's we'll be exploring that. Be very academic, but it's great fun.
Do you have a link to the program that you can share with me afterwards?
I can send you. I've done the brochure, so I'll send you the brochure. Yeah, I'll send you the brochure. Awesome. Cheers, man.
Why don't you talk a little bit about, because I know you do some sales training with and for Slater, and I'm sure that you probably do, I would assume that you do engagements with individual customers and clients.
I do it privately as well. Yeah, I do it privately as well. So I ran an LSP for 25 years, came out of it last year, always trying to study sales and trying to break it down to the process and trying to work out what it is and where marketing ends and sales starts and so on. So I've always evangelized about that, and invariably it crosses into business strategy. And one place I've been able to evangelize is conferences in the industry. Our industry is amazing. I love it. I'll see you in Portland, and it's brilliant.
Maybe if I can make it there, I'm riding my bike.
So. Yeah. We're all counting on you, man. We're all counting on you.
Yeah.
So that's a great platform to share your knowledge, and that's helped. That you get feedback for that. So it's helped me. I've also managed to do it through uni as well. So that's helped as well. So now teach there. Spoke to Slater last year, and Slater were looking at. They do all this research. I'm a fan of memoQ. I'm a fan of Slater as well. So I've always liked what those guys do. And we had a conversation around their research, and I said, look, if we were in a different universe and you were a business school, then we'd use those as case studies and we'd teach on top of the case studies, and we'd add some models and we'd get the people to use the models with the case study and then to learn through that. So we said, why not? So we did. So the first piece of research given was the operations growth guide. I can't remember what it's called exactly. But on top of that, we built operations management 101 course, and then we built a specific LSP operations management course for that. So it's like a 3-week course. Then there's a gap of 6 weeks. Then there's some coaching at the end of that, because we teach you stuff, use a load of Slater research, and then hopefully the delegates have listened to what we've taught them and then applied it to their business. Then we can sort of mark them and coach them through that first thing on the milestone. And then we thought we'd do sales as well. So we did sales and marketing as well. So the next one, I believe,
pretty busy.
End of October. Yeah, I'm keeping busy. Yeah, I am.
I was thinking I got to put a professor before your name here pretty soon. You know,
not yet, mate. Not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet. I'll let you know. You'll be the second to know when it happens. It will happen one day. It will. I've got to do my PhD first. That's the trouble.
Well, PhD in life experience. It sounds like. But what? Do you have any book recommendations? And this is in the context of sales, business development, or just general business.
Yeah, for sales. So it's a bit old now, but Spin Selling by Neil Rackham.
Yeah.
Neil's a professor from my uni, so I know him, and he's really genuine. And the research he did was, 35,000 bits of research, and it's a great book. It's really easily to understand.
What are some of the key tenets of the Spin Selling program?
So SPIN, can we put me on the spot now? So SPIN stands for situation, problem, impact, and then N is needs, but it shouldn't really be value. But you can't call it, he wanted to call it SPIV, but you can't call it SPIV because that's a swear word in the UK. So you can't call it SPIV selling. That sounds really funny.
Don't be selling those.
You can't call it that. Yeah, exactly. So I call it SPIN, and then SPIN matches. But the key things around that are, it's about, so he interviewed or did research 30,000 salespeople.
Yeah.
And he found that the people that are achieving the best results, the people that ask certain questions at certain stages, they go through this basic 4-stage model now. Now, if he was, he's an old guy now, but if he was on the call now, he'd say, yes, but we've got the internet. So our salespeople, we should turn up. I mean, this was written late 80s, early 90s. So, but we should turn up, knowing the situation that the customer's in. I'm Facebook and I want to conquer the world, or whatever the situation is. We should know the problems that they're going to face with that. We should probably start to know the implication. And it's almost about confirming the implication of awesome translation service plus world leading organization equals, share price goes up, hitting their target, making loads of profit, whatever the thing is. And then it's a case about calculating that value. Needs payoff, he called it, but it's about calculating the value in that thing as well. I like the model because he's modest enough to change it slightly over the years, and it still kind of stands a test of time around breaking it down to a process and then going through that. And it's sort of the first one you learn as well, and it's really popular. Nowadays there's things like the Challenger sale, which is talking about challenging the customer and thinking about, well, we're perhaps more of an expert than they are in helping them to frame their thinking, which is a bit controversial, but we can, I think as an industry, we need to understand how awesome we are and how amazing and unique and strange we are as an industry. And it's about communicating that to the customers and thinking you're selling your ecosystem to these large organizations. And that's something that they'll really value.
Totally agree. And I'm a big advocate of having a process. And I've worked with different sales teams and different individuals, and they're like, I have my own, way. And I'm like, okay, if you're talking about shooting from the hip and just making it up as you go, you're probably, it's going to be a little bit challenging. But if you have a defined process, whether it's Spin or Challenger or whatever, or maybe it's a combination of several things.
Consultancy, Boston's model, whatever it is, Bosworth's model, whatever.
But you should know where you're going, and always be planning for the next step. And how do I get to the next step?
See, putting my sort of business hat on from an operations management point of view, if it's a process, we can measure it. What gets measured gets managed, quoting Drucker, but we can measure it and we can improve it over time. Then after 5 years, we've had these tiny changes that really start to add up over time. And then that competency in our organization so let's say in our imaginary LSP, we'd build that competency of being able to understand and communicate the value that we offer to large corporate accounts. Chef's kiss, right? You can start to roll that out to different markets and different opportunities. And that's that's your culture. That's the way you do things. Sometimes it's quite hard to copy.
One of the important things of understanding the value is you have to believe in what you're selling. And if you think that you're just selling words, it's probably hard to get motivated to go out and sell it. And you might not think, you may be like, God, we're kind of expensive but if you really understand the value, it's easy to get excited about it and enthusiastic about it. And that stuff's contagious. People start going like, wow, man, these guys got something special. Any parting words of advice for today to wrap up today's episode?
No, I'll just pick up on that last point because that's really interesting. I think if you're authentic and you actually believe in the company that you're working for, so I've been lucky. I always have, and it's always been about we're coming at it from the right place. So I think that's a match of the company's values, how that can flow through the organisation to actually, where the rubber hits the road sort of things in terms of the sales force. And it's about that. You want to attract the right people and that you need to motivate them properly and things like that. So that's about establishing your values and being authentic and having integrity and all these normal human traits that sometimes get lost in the corporate world. But it's about that. And it is. If you can evangelize and believe in what you're selling, then it's quite addictive and quite contagious, isn't it? It's like, that's the...
I can share a old war story, but I don't know if you know this, but I worked with Florian at CLS, and
right. Oh gosh, right, okay.
Yeah, and we were out in Asia, and we were very specialized in the translation of financial services related content. Yep. Okay, and so we deal with IB, investment banking, equity research, asset management, some private banking, but we knew those fields, and we had built such a very strong team that we would go in and we'd speak the customer's language, and we had such we were very confident in our ability to deliver the appropriate service for each customer, and it was fun. It's fun when you go in and you're solving their problems, you're helping them solve the problems, and it really, especially the last couple of years, because the team was so strong, we go in and we had customers. I'll say the name now, but CITIC in China. Right. They're like, "Oh, you guys are too expensive. We're going to switch providers." And we're like, "Okay, fine." Didn't because our business was growing at such a rate that we're like, "Fine." They came 3 months later because their Canadian sales team was complaining about the quality of the translation. They came back to us, right? Yeah. And when things like that happen, it just gives you confidence and you feel good about going out there. So
you do. Which flows through that's about the culture of the organisation. I'm not surprised knowing you two. I'm not surprised that was the case, but
well, we had a great team, and that helps.
Yeah.
Hey, Richard, I'm going to put links to your summit in November, and any other training programs that you want to share with me. I'll put them in the show notes.
Yeah, cheers, man. Thank you.
Really appreciate you coming on memoQ Talks. I'd like to have a follow-up conversation sometime, possibly just about overall business strategy.
Yeah, sure.
And I look forward to seeing you at the ALC event in Portland if I make it there.
With sore legs.
Yes, sore legs. And I'll be very thirsty, by the way.
Good on you for doing it. Well, hey,
I'll need to hydrate.
First one's on me, mate. But no, great talk to you, Mark. Cheers.
Thank you for joining memoQ Talks, where we talked with industry leaders about their experiences and lessons learned to gain new insights about what works best across all areas of localization. Join us next time on memoQ Talks.